This episode of the ABIC podcast is brought to you by the Holmes Glen Institute. Hello and welcome to the ABIC podcast, your online support community for the aesthetic and beauty industry. Here, we're strengthening and unifying the industry through representation, innovation, and education. This is a platform created and dedicated to the aesthetic and beauty industry, valuing unity and advancement. We serve to represent, support, and inspire you by connecting you with industry experts, expanding your knowledge through educational pieces, and bringing you the latest industry news. This is the ABIC podcast. Welcome, I'm your host Stephanie Miller, and today I am joined by Marketta Gray, Education Manager at Holmes Glen Institute, to explore the ever-evolving role of beauty therapy. In this episode, we unpack why beauty is often misunderstood as a soft trade, the reality of the science and skill behind it, and how beauty therapy aligns with allied health principles, particularly in supporting mental well-being, confidence, and resilience. We also explore the ethical responsibility of the industry, the importance of normalising diverse skin conditions, and what the future of education must look like to bridge the gap between training and real-world expectations. This is a thoughtful and important conversation about respect, responsibility, and the true depth of the beauty profession. Welcome to the podcast, Marketta. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. We had an incredible conversation recently, and it really informed a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. For those of you who don't know Marketta, she is incredible. She works at Holmes Glen, Holmes Glen TAFE, who are members, education members of the Aesthetic and Beauty Industry Council, which is such a fabulous thing because we get so many industry and education insights from this wonderful institution, and particularly from you, Marketta. And you have an interesting story, actually, because you're not originally from this industry.
I am not originally from this industry, no. I come from a completely different industry. So my industry is hospitality, and I'm a trained chef and pastry chef. That is my background, and I was probably the last of the generation to go through a really difficult chefing apprenticeship. I think it was probably the hardest 4 years I've ever encountered in my life, but I've had some amazing experiences from that. So I have a 5-star hotel and resort background in terms of running patisserie departments. So and have been very fortunate to travel with that as well. So
that's incredible.
It's been an interesting journey.
Well, that's a high pressure, extremely high resilience required industry.
Yes, it is. There's been a couple of occasions where I've been taken into the cool room by a head chef, that's for sure, and getting a talking to about performance or doing something wrong or splitting a hollandaise sauce or something like that. So, if you could imagine Gordon Ramsay, that was definitely my apprenticeship.
Wow, and in the cool room too. That's not scary, is it?
No, clearly you're not allowed to do that anymore. But back then, that was fairly normal.
Wow, and our industry as well. It does need a lot of resilience, but we definitely don't get that type of resilience training, I can tell you now.
You definitely you basically walked into it having a thick skin straight away. If you didn't have a thick skin, you weren't going to survive it, basically. Mm-hmm. So but we got through it, and had some amazing experiences with it. Got to work with some really interesting and fascinating people. So certainly built my confidence in terms of engaging with people and things like that as well. So definitely makeup, not in my resume or repertoire by any stretch of the imagination.
No treatments, no.
No, you are legitimately talking to a person who is incredibly skeptical of the beauty industry. I do not own any makeup whatsoever. It's not part of my engineering, basically. I don't think about it at all. I don't even think I've set foot inside Mecca.
Wow, this is going to be an interesting, extremely, I suppose, and a conversation from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I love this. And because you have so many insights as well from somebody who's
outside of the industry looking in. So how did you land at Homesglen?
I landed at Homesglen through applying for a sessional position to teach commercial cookery. Ended up getting that role and fairly quickly moved or got asked actually to become an educational manager, and from there that's kind of evolved in terms of my skill set and I guess what I can bring to the table and how I contribute to not only the department but the faculty level. So my primary role is educational manager for the Faculty of Hospitality, Environment, Lifestyle and Business. So it's quite a unique position actually, because it allows me to go into departments and as a supporting role to either work with not only the dean of our faculty, but the heads of the department and other educational managers, and also the staff at the front lines in terms of helping and assisting with program development and assessment in terms of quality and compliance is the key focus. So just recently, more so at the beginning of this year, I was asked to assist the lifestyle department, which our beauty courses sit under. Right. And it has been quite the education that I have received very quickly. So I have a newfound appreciation for the beauty industry, actually, more so because my vocabulary has increased. I'm learning words about contraindications and things like this as well, which I have not actually heard that word before since this year. So it's, learning about that, it's been really interesting, and talking to staff and finding out their backgrounds and how they got into the industry as well, I think is quite crucial to how that is, transferred into the, the learner's journey as well.
I love that. And now, coming from a person that's outside of the beauty industry, I want to know personally, what were your initial perceptions of it, and really how have they kind of changed and evolved since working closely with that particular department at Homesglen?
Look, I think, as a person in the world, I think I had that sort of perception that the beauty industry was probably based on vanity, and it was considered potentially a soft skill set that, you go into it because you couldn't do anything else, or you may have been pushed into it by your parents or something of this nature, or you're not quite sure in terms of what career pathway you want to take, so I'll just do this for, to bide time or something like this. It was certainly an industry that I certainly did not take particularly seriously. I probably didn't hold it on the same level as other trades in terms of plumbers or carpenters and so forth. But I can see my view and perception of the beauty industry is very, very different in terms of what I've been exposed to recently, and that is it's a highly technical trade, and there is a tremendous amount of skill involved in working with clients, having that confidence, and just it should be considered on equal footing as any other trade, particularly because, I guess if you were to compare plumbers, they're not necessarily engaging face-to-face with clients. They're just told the brief and then off they go and build it. But the beauty, you are literally working with clients that have booked in or rocked up randomly. You've got that one opportunity to get it right, to satisfy, that client's request in that moment in real time. And it's, it's the science behind it as well. It's looking at the shape of the face, the contours, the skin pigmentations, things like this, all extraordinarily important. If you happen to, you need to understand product knowledge and the ethical boundaries around product, and particularly as we move into a lot of sustainability products as well. So hugely technical. Keeping up with trends is also part of that technical skill, and disseminating, the influences and social media platforms and the impact that has had on the beauty industry versus, how that translates to that technical skill, making sure that you're being professional at all times and so forth. So it's been a huge learning curve for me, and certainly a big eye-opener.
Well, it's beautiful to hear. And so you mentioned the words soft trade. Where do you think that perception actually came from out there, from parents, from schools, from the general public? Where do you think that perception originated?
I think it's probably across the board, and I think it's more of a community sort of societal thing. Women always had to be seen as being made up, and you can closely tie that with their own belief and value system. So sometimes there's potential there. Women potentially didn't feel like they held in the same regard if they didn't have their makeup on or weren't seen as being taken seriously without makeup and so forth, all throughout the decades, the generations and things like this as well. And, and I think, those soft skills, it's just like, well, how hard could it be? It's that perception, that's where it's come from. Well, you're not building things, you're not designing things. How hard can it be to put some red lipstick on, for instance? But it's very technical. You're looking at the shape and size of the lips. You're looking at the color versus the skin pigments, and as mentioned before, and making sure that blends, not only satisfying the client but also making sure that they're not going to have an allergic reaction to that, and the regulations around that and the liabilities around that as well. Like, you have to be fairly au fait with that. And I think there definitely should be a shift, and I can see that shift. Hopefully, moving forward and hopefully changing that, the perception of people and how they view this industry, so it can potentially be taken as seriously as it should.
And there's two parts to this industry. One is really is likened to a trade. It is a trade. So you've got your Cert 3, you've got makeup, and you've got the technical part of, say, a massage and the traditional beauty treatments. And that would be in your certificates. But we've also got a diploma of beauty therapy. And qualified diploma of beauty therapy involves a lot of other types of education. And some of that would be considered academic education, because we're learning about physiology, skin physiology, biology. We're learning about lots of different things in terms of a client's mental health and well-being, wellness, diet, lifestyle factors and things like that. We often need to know about medications for interactions.
Exactly.
There's a strong component of theory within this that is likened to academic theory, which you would get, obviously, if you're a doctor or a nurse. Can you share some examples that you personally hold that would be aligned or align beauty therapy to allied health, or considered more of a transformative trade, especially in relation to what we just spoke about, which is mental health and well-being?
Yeah, look, I think, in terms of articles that I have read throughout the year, and, there's definitely research that is leaning towards indicating that, particularly with the diploma, and because of that higher level of academics, if you will, it's definitely leaning towards equal pairing with, complementary health and health services. We had a rare opportunity to speak to some industry experts, and these were just brilliant women in their field. And, the question was posed, do you see beauty therapists, when you are consulting with a client, that you are an informal frontline healthcare worker? And there was a resounding response as, yes, absolutely. And you have to pay attention to that. You have to really go, okay, there's something in that. We have to work with that. We have to move forward with that. We have to build and develop that, because it's quite true. I mean, I can imagine that a client getting some intensive specialized facial treatments would be divulging all sorts of personal information about potentially, family members or their marriage or whatever that may look like. And it's about being professional in that response and taking that on. But also, like you say, it's because of the academics that are involved, learning about the lymphatic system, learning about the reproductive system, for instance, and the dermatology behind it in terms of how the skin reacts, the layers of the skin, and how, certain treatments can actually impact the skin. I mean, these are all in alignment with, nurses and, other professional healthcare workers. So it would be really good I can see it certainly as a growth area, both from an industry standpoint and also from an educational standpoint as well. I think it ties in a lot of different things as well. And also the psychology behind it, I think, is very, very vital.
Absolutely. The psychology behind what we do is incredible. And we in our industry understand that, feeling good about the way we look translates to improved mental well-being, and also translates to physical well-being as well, because when you look in the mirror, you look rested, you look, youthful and refreshed and vibrant. That messages to our body to say, oh yes, right, we're young, we're healthy, we're great. Obviously serotonin goes up, dopamine, all those wonderful chemicals in our body that make us feel good and make us healthy. And that's no small attribute to ignore. And I think more and more people are starting to understand it. We shared a couple of personal stories in our last conversation as well. Would you want to share a personal story or experience that really for you kind of, and for us as well, will illustrate the, surprising for you depth and impact of the beauty industry?
I think one of the surprising depths of the beauty industry for me just actually happened about 2 weeks ago. It was my daughter's year 12 graduation. And the only specification was to get my hair done, which only happens once every 2 to 5 years, I would say. And I'm not one that automatically goes, well, I've got to go and put the face on. So I got the hair done, and it was just a very serendipitous opportunity, actually, that was actually one of our own beauty students who said, look, we've got a bit of time and etc. They're more than happy to, it's a really special occasion. Why don't you actually just use your lunch break to, have them put makeup on? And I probably sweated for the first time in a long time. I was really, really anxious and really, really nervous about it. Not particularly comfortable having makeup on my face at all. I don't like the sensation of it and so forth. But the student was actually really, really good, engaged really well. And, what did I like? And I said, I want it to look as if I don't have any makeup on, like really minimalistic. And she did an absolutely stellar job at doing that. Now, I might not have felt comfortable. I might not have felt even more confident having makeup on. I probably felt very vulnerable, actually, having makeup on. But my daughter met me on campus just as we were ready to leave for the day to get ready for the big occasion for her to walk the plank. And, she loved the hair, of course. But I turned my face, and as we're driving out of the campus, we almost had an accident because she was absolutely thrilled that I had put makeup on because of what that makeup represented for her. And in that moment, putting my own uncomfortabilities aside and knowing the impact that having been made up and putting makeup on impacted her so greatly that she was actually, I didn't embarrass her in public. She was very proud to show me off to not only her friends, who I've known throughout her whole high school experience, but certainly introducing me to the parents of her friends after the graduation. And, just to see the pure joy in her face to go, oh my God, Mum, you look absolutely gorgeous, was just thrilling for me to see her reaction. So that to me is the power of what makeup can actually do. And sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes it's about how it influences and impacts other people.
And that's just illustrating, when the trade is done well, the impact that it can have on yourself and others as well. And that's why those skills are so crucial. Please tell us some of the most crucial technical skills that beauty therapists would need today.
Look, I think technical skills, absolutely, they would need to know, obviously, current trends and how that translates into their role and how that translates into the products that they're using. But also, I think, as mentioned, part of that technical skill is disseminating, truth from someone's private channel that may not, they may not be industry experts, etc. Technical skills, it does come down to, they need to know about lighting. They need they need to understand also how it interlinks with media. Camouflage makeup and things like this as well. And they, as you've mentioned as well, it's about knowing, keeping up with equipment and things like that, keeping up with products, knowing what's in those, knowing that contour or that foundation has a specific product that is quite prone if someone has a particular irritation to it, and knowing that to divert a client potentially from that product and maybe adjusting and having to, to adapt and to use something else. So huge amounts of technical skill, I would say, that are involved in that, and again, as I think as mentioned before, it's understanding the skin, understanding the dermal layers and what it actually does, reactions, allergies, things like this. It's also technical skill in regards to what we spoke about before in terms of the psychology, not only for yourself in terms of your own emotional well-being when dealing with clients and having the ability not to take on their emotions, but also having the capacity to navigate around that. That's all sort of technical skills associated with the industry and what they would have to learn, to be outstanding at what they do and be professional.
Holmes Glen Institute is one of Australia's leading vocational education providers, delivering nationally recognised training in beauty therapy and dermal practice. With an industry-aligned curriculum, hands-on clinical learning, and a strong focus on professionalism and client care, Holmes Glen prepares graduates with the technical skill, resilience, and confidence needed to thrive in today's evolving beauty sector. Whether you're starting your journey or advancing your qualifications, explore your future in beauty with Holmes Glen. Visit www.holmesglen.edu.au.
So do you actually see that there is a relationship between, I would say, emotional intelligence, resilience, and then correlating to success in the beauty industry? Do you think the skills are actually taught well enough?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's vital, and it's actually very much a hot topic at the moment in terms of resilience, confidence. What we would probably assume that people would come into our courses or and having those what we would call life skills, but that's not the evidence that we're seeing. Our student cohort are not coming in confident, having the capacity to even talk to another person or another classmate that is not their friend, and so forth. And having that resilience and that emotional intelligence, I mean, they're quite superpowers, aren't they? That's exactly what we need. I mean, it helps us to connect, and it helps obviously build our confidence and so forth. And is it taught? No, not particularly well. And it's something that I think is just currently getting looked at quite a bit, actually, because it has been identified that you can have an assessment, you can have this unit of competency that's going to run for 6 weeks, and at the end of this is the key objectives that you're going to learn, but they don't know how to communicate or when we talk about having a thick skin earlier, it's not something that you can necessarily teach. There has been discussion, should it be a separate unit that is embedded and incorporated into, the diploma and the certificate 3? And I dare say it's probably better to actually just embed it all the way through. So it reinforces those skills, and, to teach them that, we can say, look, toughen up, wish you were more resilient, but we don't know what that actually looks like at the individual level. So we actually have to show them what that looks like, and that could be through role plays and case studies, scenarios, and things like this, and potentially just getting industry people in, so they're actually really face-to-face interacting with the students to say, well, hey, this is my background, this is what I encountered, this is how I dealt with it, but this is how I'm dealing with it now because of my experience, etc. So showing them in real time again that there are tools that we can teach learners coming up through the ranks that that to better prepare them for that, to have that emotional intelligence and so forth. And I would imagine at the end of a workday that you'd be quite drained working with clients every day.
Do you think there's a part of, I suppose, the education process that could benefit more from hands-on work experience with regards to emotional intelligence and building that resilience early on? And do we do that enough, do you think?
We probably don't do it enough, but certainly I think, yes, if there's a little bit more industry exposure, so they're not kind of just getting that classroom environment, I think it's pivotal, and it's just critical to supporting that process, basically, so that by the time that they graduate, they are very well-rounded. They not only have the really good, strong foundation for technical skills and so forth, but they've got a really good understanding and grasp of how to manage situations and things like that when they do get into the workplace, and certainly work placement and is absolutely beneficial to that.
I feel like what we deal with in particular in our industry is so complex sometimes. It's not just about makeup, applying makeup or, treating a particular skin condition. Our emotions are so linked to, our appearance. Our face is our interface with the world. And if we feel that is an interruption in that, or they don't feel like themselves, it can really impact their confidence quite a lot, right? And so we have to be teaching our students that when you're dealing with skin and beauty, you're actually dealing with inner health, emotional well-being, and well-being, and it's so inextricably linked that we can't possibly separate the two. If you have bad makeup, you are that person will be truly upset. If you something goes wrong with their skin, that will impact their confidence for days, and that's a lot of pressure on young students coming out all these days as well. And the education of our students, how do you normalize, or how do you help the industry normalize diverse skin conditions, support clients feeling that sense of confidence regardless of their appearance or the outcome of that treatment? Because as therapists, you can't fix everything. How do you translate that?
I think it's probably translatable in terms of, getting back to the linkages between, mental health and the psychology behind it and so forth. And I think, it's from the learner's perspective, it's like it's two-pronged in a sense, because we can help build the learner up. They would have more confidence in their abilities, knowing that they're actually intrinsically adding value to somebody else's life in that moment and so forth. And I think that's really, really, really important to the process. And I think it's about not seeing it as a flaw, basically. It's not seeing a scar on your face as a flaw that needs to be necessarily covered up, but it's about using that makeup to say, to build that confidence, to empower, basically. Was probably a better word, and to transform that person for the duration of when they're having that makeup on. I think that's how you would do that. And I think it comes down to, inclusivity and embedding that across units on a day-by-day, lesson-by-lesson sort of basis. And that can be done quite subtly, or it can be done more impactfully. And again, just reinforcing that to say that, it doesn't really matter what the face shape is, skin color, tone, what have you. This is what you're going to, this is how you approach it. And you're doing it with a lot of empathy as well, without judgment. And I think that's how you combat that. And again, it comes down to a lot of role plays, case studies and scenarios that are based on reality. That, yes, actually we're doing this role play because this is actually what you can encounter, because this is the diversity of the population and so forth. So it's not simple. It can be quite complex. And there's also, you may actually be potentially dealing with people with, a belief and value system that differs from your own, and that's the client that you're working with. So you have to navigate through that, and that's something that we can potentially work with students to do as well, to teach, to say that, what if you have a client that's requested something very specific that might not be in your repertoire? How do you maintain client satisfaction without actually upsetting them and, their belief system and so forth? And so, it does come down to a really broad inclusivity and, celebrating that in a sense.
I mean, speaking of inclusivity, we talk about this ethical responsibility now that our industry has for really shaping societal standards of what, normal appearance is, or what beautiful appearance is. It's a huge responsibility for our professionals to take on. Social media has played a part in shifting what that looks like as well. Where do you think, where would we start to try to talk about this in our schools? What do you think we need to incorporate in our teachings and in the learner's journey to be able to create that more inclusive, empowering definition of beauty rather than a fit inside a box type beauty?
Yeah, I think, social media in terms of the influencer has definitely played a big part in that. And it can, social media and YouTube and influencers can be very impactful in a certain way, but they can also cause a lot of damage in terms of that. And I think from an ethical standpoint, it's about, again, disseminating truth and fact from potentially what could be someone's personal opinion, which would reflect on the beauty industry and so forth, which is not always great from a learner's perspective. But using YouTube and social media as a platform in and of itself, that it's a very powerful tool to use, but to use it responsibly. And from an ethical standpoint, to try and teach our learners that it is about responsibility and accountability for your decisions that you make and the actions that you do, when you gain employment within the industry and so forth. So I think that's really, really, really important. And it's, again, a big topic of conversation in staff rooms of how we tackle that from an educational standpoint. So, and it may be that we may have to be innovative and dynamic in the way that we approach things, to basically maybe preface a particular topic to say that now this could be potentially triggering, but we're actually going to work this through for the next 2 weeks, and by the end of it, this is the outcome, and then, reinforce that through other units and so forth. So we're not sheltering them, essentially, that, they're getting a really good grasp of the reality of the industry as well. It's not sometimes always through rose-coloured glasses that we view this.
We brought up TikTok and social media and TikTok University, which everyone seems to be going to these days.
Yeah.
Especially to learn beauty. I don't know how that happened, but that is a real thing. Our learners are now, taking themselves out of the school and institution environment and self-teaching TikTok, YouTube, through other influences, not necessarily in the right way, right? But I mean, speaking of that, and then also talking about these, barriers that we see in really to breaking the stigmas around, the visible differences, our skin conditions, culture. How do you think formal education rather than TikTok University can work together with industry to overcome these challenges, really foster true empathy and get back to the root of the reason why we do this?
Oh, look, I think it's just about open communication channels, basically, and I think it's about really that engagement across the board with industry, with educational providers on a regular basis, and really just working through some key concepts and seeing how that can be applied from an educational standpoint, and also from an industry standpoint as well, so that there's common ground to make that actually work. So I think, to minimise, the ignorance and the fear that may be associated with those sorts of things, and to, bring to light and to reinforce again that, as you mentioned, how can you learn technical skills if you're not practically doing them and practicing them on a day-to-day basis? And, if you're having a course that's just online through TikTok, you're doing a learner a disservice by having that student enroll in that course, and they may not know any differently. It's just because it's a cheaper course and it's for a shorter duration of time. So I think it also, comes back to that representation of education too, in terms of, yes, this is a 12-month course, but this is an intense course, but these are the practical skills. It is practically based, with real simulated rooms and things like this as well. I think it's absolutely important to do that.
It's vital. How do you get the message out there to, the young people looking to be in our industry? I mean, what's the magic bullet there? Like, do we do a campaign? And do you sit at TAFE with the other teachers and say, how do we get students to come back into the formal education environment? And what ideas have you come up with?
Look, I think it's about integrating wellbeing, basically wellbeing education. So I think it comes back to having it being ethical, transformative, and human-centered, and tapping into that that healthcare pathway. I think would be a very big draw card in the future for the beauty industry, because it's about changing people's perception, and one way to do that is through the healthcare system, and having it through the allied health or the complementary health sectors, and having that become a lot stronger platform for that. I think it'd be very enticing, because it's two-pronged. It's it's not only building, as we spoke about, resilience and satisfying industry needs, because, we want our graduates to be confident, strong, knowledgeable, and have the skills necessary. But it's also building those courses along those health pathways and the psychology behind that as well, that's all interlinked, for mental health and things like that. It's actually going to help the learner themselves who may be struggling with that while they're undertaking their own studies in beauty. And it will help them to we are learning this, we are doing this because they can see that it's going to add huge amounts of value, not only to themselves and their skill set that they're about to embark on and learn, but also really huge value adding and contribution to the community, basically, when they get into the industry. And I think that's definitely, the pathway forward. And I think digital innovation can assist with that. But not in a TikTok, YouTube fashion. And I think co-designing curricula too, helping industry come in and actually help to design and develop that, I think is super important. Yes, it will align with the training package and our mandated units of competency and how education actually works, but it's also getting industry into, well, yes, we have the rigidness of our unit of competency or a diploma that goes for X amount of units, core units, but having industry come in to help design that in terms of embedding those core and key and current industry trends in terms of what they're seeing into that unit development, I think is crucial moving forward.
And it's an exciting time now because we are entering a period just before the submission goes in to reopen the qualifications for review. SACSA, AVIC is working alongside SACSA, and I'm sure TAFE is very involved as well, and you are on our education committee. So it's a very interesting, very promising time for our industry to be able to go back, really examine what it is that we are delivering, how we're delivering it, and finding ways to make it not just more, I suppose, industry relevant, but making it more enticing for learners to want to come into this, because we're finding, learners come in and then they're like, this isn't what I expected, and possibly continue. But if it's fit for purpose and it's right for the time right now, you'll see a lot more engagement, you'll see a lot more student retention, but you'll just attract a different type of person to the industry, and that's what we're looking for. Looking into the future with your crystal ball, where do you actually see the future of education in the beauty industry? What changes would you like to see? And, how do you think we can bridge that gap between education and industry expectation, which seems to be through the roof?
Ooh, it's a big piece of the puzzle, and it's but I think it's literally just one foot in front of the other, one step forward here and there. And I think it is really just the convergence of the industry and education coming together to help bridge that gap, and as you mentioned before, to make it enticing, to make it engaging, and, for lack of a better word, make it the industry sexy in a very from an academic standpoint, and from an educational standpoint, from an industry standpoint too, to make I actually really want to do this. This is actually going to be exciting. I'm going to have a really exciting journey. Really want to get engaged with the industry and so forth. And I think one way is, again, to really tap into mental health. The statistics. We all know the statistics. 1 in 4 people have a mental health issue. And so forth, and just really tapping into that, I think, is probably one of the pivotal moments where it would definitely be a pathway moving forward, in that crystal ball moment, to see more of an alignment with that, and to help and assist. We know statistically, we see it in the news that due to the mental health crisis and so forth, that health professionals are struggling. They're booked out for 6 months. People who are in crisis can't get the assistance that they needed in that moment. And I think that crystal ball, we can, the beauty industry can really contribute to that and help to even potentially alleviate and support that as part of the role of what industry can, what the beauty industry can do in support of that. So that's probably where I hope the future is for the beauty industry. going beyond not just the lipstick, but making sure that what that lipstick represents, basically.
Wow, how well said was that, and how profound. Such a beautiful message to leave the industry on, and I do think it resonates with the heart of what we actually do. And most of the time, the reason why we get into this is to really just help people to be happier and more confident in themselves, and to let them express themselves through that individuality, which really leads to a more fulfilled, more beautiful, just satisfying life. And I really think you nailed it and hit it right on the head with that explanation. I love the work that you're doing through TAFE and through Homesglen. I love the conversations we've had and the contribution that you give to the industry. It's so much needed, but it's also from such a unique standpoint. So I'd really like to thank you on behalf of ABIC and also the industry for all the great work that you do, in stewarding the new generation of therapists into our industry as well.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation, and power to the red lipstick.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
You've reached the end of another episode of the ABIC podcast, your online support community for the aesthetic and beauty industry. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay connected.